Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne,
Welcome to Empowered Now.
where we save humanity one relationship at a time. We all struggle from time to time connecting with and understanding others and ourselves.
So we hope to encourage you to live a more authentic and empowered life by sharing what we've learned as coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Now is LGBTQ2IA, alternative lifestyle, poly, and kink friendly.
Thanks for joining us
And enjoy the show.
And welcome to episode 22 of Empowered Now. Today, we're going to talk about new relationship energy, or NRE, which is also known as crushing, limerence, infatuation, the honeymoon phase, and falling in love. So, Leanne, what is it? What exactly is new relationship energy?
Well, it's a biological response created through evolution to help us procreate, essentially. So its purpose is to keep us together long enough that we can have a baby and that the pregnant mother and the baby will thrive. It doesn't discriminate between genders. And so gender combinations doesn't matter, still happens. And I know it sounds really romantic this way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's basically the hormones, dopamine and oxytocin, the feel-good hormones that are released. Oxytocin also reduces your pain by about 40%. And then that's the one that's released during labor as well. And oxytocin makes us feel energized. Dopamine makes us feel giddy, gives us that sort of, feel-good rush that we want to keep repeating. So it really enforces that we want to stay with this person, see more of them. And vasopressin is also released, which I didn't know about. And that is a hormone that increases our attachment and protectiveness and desire to connect. So that real heady, yummy cocktail is also impacted by a reduced amount of serotonin and an increase in adrenaline and norepinephrine. So that combination, the reduced serotonin and adrenaline and norepinephrine, equals an anxious response. And the anxiety that comes with this, we often interpret as, butterflies and that anticipatory kind of sweatiness or increased heart rate, sweaty palms, nervous feeling. So when we put all of that chemical reaction together, what we're feeling is essentially, the things that we've learned to describe as falling in love. And it lasts anywhere from a few months to a couple of years. And for some people, a little bit longer, especially if they have, distance.
Mm-hmm. Does everybody feel it?
Yes, but to varying degrees and in certain circumstances. So it's kind of like the chemicals have to be right, like your pheromones have to jive.
Right.
But it is a byproduct of being sexually aroused and touched and comforted, all of which occur in intimacy.
So I wonder, I'm just curious, actually, it's a little off topic, but I wonder if asexual people experience it.
Oh yeah, because you don't have to have the sexually aroused component in order to feel it, for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it's interesting because NRE also has elements of risk, of loss, right? Because it's not an established relationship, so we don't feel as secure, right? Yeah. And that's kind of exciting. I mean, it's like, jumping off a cliff. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, right? And there's that element of excitement to it. So, that plays a role, I think, in all the feel-good hormones and all of that stuff too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, even approaching the cliff, it's that feeling of, I'm going to tell this person how I feel, that first kind of confession moment of like, I'm getting feelings for you or whatever, right? The analogy of approaching a cliff is great, actually, or jumping off a cliff.
Yeah.
You get that rush.
Yeah. And then, you get that rush of that excitement, right? And then, so if you meet somebody for the first time and it goes really well, and it's like, oh my God, right? You're hyper focused on that person a lot, right? Right. Esther Perel, actually, who you're a big fan of, in her book Mating in Captivity, discusses what encourages desire. So things like novelty, separateness, and distance. These all create opportunities for pursuit, obstacles. Basically limited times equals preciousness and increased appreciation. And
Hmm.
all of these things exist in new relationship energy, right?
Right.
Or sorry, they exist in new relationships, which creates that new relationship energy, right?
Hmm.
So our desire becomes heightened. Like I said, our focus and attention is turned way up on that person or that relationship.
Hmm.
We feel, like you mentioned, happier. We tasks seem easier, like you said earlier. Our pain is decreased. Our confidence is way up. Like, meeting somebody new and you're like, oh yeah, I'm a badass, and you
Hmm.
feel confident and you feel strong and powerful and all of that stuff. And we have this intense need to invest in our time and our energy in order to continue and repeat that experience, almost like a drug. In fact, it is a drug, some say. Much
Well,
very similar to yeah.
very
What?
similar.
Yeah.
I would argue it's the same.
Right, right. Well, that's what I'm going to say. It is actually the same. So, established relation, so there's NRE, and then there's ERE, which is established or existing relationship energy.
Hmm.
These are things, this kind of energy offers us some really important things. Like, we crave security, trust, nurturing, consistency, reliability, a love without the risk of loss, understanding, and then what Jessica Fern refers to as a secure base, where we can feel free to explore the world and know we have a supportive person to return to, right?
Hmm.
So that's what ERE, or established relationship energy, provides us. So they're very different. And then oftentimes NRE becomes ERE over time. At least that's, I don't know, would you say that's the goal?
Yeah. I mean, for long-term
Yeah.
relationships, yeah.
Right, for sure. So I think what happens, though, is problems kind of arise when we let the NRE start to impact our daily lives in a negative way, right?
Yes.
Like our daily function, we might, obsessive thinking, anxiety, a lack of eating or sleeping, a lack of focus or concern for anything else other than this new person or this new relationship that you're in.
Hmm.
That's when it can become problematic, right? Like it gets in the way of things. But at the same time, like going to the edge of that cliff, that's what you're thinking about. Like you're so focused on that everything else just sort of kind of disappears. And that can impact existing relationships pretty significantly at times.
It sure can.
Right?
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to note that that can impact in both the negative and the positive, right?
Mm, yep.
Like if your partner is riding the NRE wave and you're excited for them and you're feeling compersive or compersion, right? That feeling of, happy that they're happy and they're energized and they're feeling great and they've got a boost in their confidence, a spring in their step, right?
Mhm.
That can be really exciting and fun for the established partner, right?
Mhm.
And it can also be both. You can have feelings of like positive impact along with recognizing that there's some negative impacts.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, I think it's about balance,
Yeah, that's a
finding
great
that
word.
balance
Uh-huh.
between the two, right? Being able to invest in a new relationship but also honor and continue investing in the existing relationship or the
Yes.
established relationship,
Ding, 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 ding. Yes, you
right?
win.
And that's
Yes.
where that balance comes into play, right? And so I think that's the most important part. And it can be challenging. It really can be.
Oh my God. Yes.
I mean, we've both experienced that. We've experienced it, both in the mono world, pre-poly days, and then as poly people,
Can
both
you
together and in other relationships.
can you talk about the experience of new relationship and energy in the mono world for a minute? Like what would that look like?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you have you meet somebody, whether these days it seems to be on a dating app where everybody's meeting. So you meet somebody on a dating app, you've got all of these things that you're looking for and interested in, and you meet that person. I mean, honestly, what comes up for me as I'm answering this question is it's the same thing. in the mono world and the poly world. I just think that it impacts people, different kinds of people in your life. So for instance, in the mono world, new relationship energy could have, if you're not finding that balance, it could have potentially damaging impacts on your friendships, on your work relationships, on your familial relationships, because you become so invested in that relationship that all of your friends, right? I mean, how many times have we heard, oh yeah, they're in love,
Oh my God. Yeah.
they'll be back in a while. Give it time, right? Like,
Yeah.
but there's some truth to that because that's what happens in the mono world and it happens in the poly world too. It just so happens that in the poly world, a lot of our friends are also our partners. So it's a little bit different, but I think the dynamic and the way that the drop in the pool spreads out, right? The ripple effect happens is pretty similar. And
Yeah.
so but you still want to be, I don't know, I think you still want to be balanced in those relationships because those friendships are still just as meaningful and just as impactful in your life, right? And that's where that balance piece comes in handy. But frankly, it's been romanticized, right? And so that romanticism has taken it to this other level of like, this is the most important kind of relationship you should ever have. And so,
Yeah.
what? You
I
don't
don't
agree?
love that. No, I don't love that.
What
I
don't you
feel
love
like
about it?
well, because platonic relationships are just as valuable as intimate ones, right? I mean, it doesn't have to
Agree.
be a romantic relationship to be the most important relationship of your life. Um, I know many people who consider their best friend more important than who they're with intimately, right? Like, or family, right? Family takes priority, whatever it is. But I feel like when we're talking about this hyper focus and why it happens, it's really good perspective because we need to kind of put it in the place where it belongs. It is a chemical reaction created to perpetuate the species.
Mhm.
A, don't expect your partner not to have it or experience it. B, when you're having it, learn how to manage it, which is what we're here to hopefully help with.
Mhm.
And then also there was a C. The C is that you know, even if it's a positive impact, it can become really problematic. It can wear over time. It can also be addictive, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be addictive. Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I didn't
Let
mean
me just
to
clarify
interrupt
what.
your
No, that's okay.
thought. Go
No,
ahead.
no, and I'm glad you did because I just want to clarify that I'm not suggesting that our romantic relationships are the most important. What I'm suggesting is that the
Good.
romanticism that we're subjected to, the programming that we're subjected to, says that that's the way it should be. That our romantic relationships, right, should be the most important. And I don't, like you, I don't agree with that. I think that they have an importance, but it doesn't mean that our friendships are any less important, right? Or a friendship, let's say, might be, so in that mono thinking, in that mono world, what tends to happen is we tend to get so focused on our intimate partner that we start to neglect our other relationships. And that's what I was trying to say about the importance
Yeah.
of it, right? And I think that happens too in the poly world with new relationships versus established relationships, right? We get so invested in this new relationship that we tend to neglect sometimes, not always, our existing relationships or established relationships, and that becomes a challenge. And that's interesting because it's a nice lead into how do we mitigate those challenges, right? How do we mitigate the challenges that NRE might create?
Well, let's talk first about how that might show up. So what does it look like when there's a negative impact, right? So your partner's not so present,
Hmm?
right? They're there physically, but they're not there mentally.
Yeah, they're on their phone all the time, texting the other person.
Classic.
They're maybe you guys have some agreements in place that aren't being honored because the new relationship energy is kind of taking a hold of the brain.
Well,
um,
and we actually put an agreement in place to manage our phone use, right? Like you and I,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
we might feel like devalued, deprioritized because of the amount of time that they're spending away, or because of the amount of investment that they're making with their new partner, the kinds of activities that they're doing. And yeah, you can still feel happy for your partner that they're experiencing all of this and struggle,
Mhm.
right? and
Right.
and want that to be solved somehow. And so I always tell people, like, don't think about it in terms of equality, because it's rarely equal between individuals. People are very complicated, relationships are complicated, time management is complicated, right? But think
Mhm.
about sorry, I just bumped the table. Think about not equality, but are your needs being met? What are your needs that aren't being met? And advocate, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
sorry, that was
And
leading
also
right
that's
into
a
what can we do?
well, that's actually a good point because I think somewhere in this list of things that we can do is this idea of comparison, right? Comparing your relationship with the new relationship, right? Because
Hmm.
they're in completely different stages,
They're completely different
right?
in every way. Like, you just went through the list of what they offer you, right?
Yeah,
And what we get from each one, we can't, like, comparing doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
Well, but we do it.
I
But we
know,
do it.
I know,
We
but
do it,
to our
and
own detriment,
that's one of
right?
the dangers. That's what I was going to say. That's one of the dangers that happens, right? Um, it's interesting because I'm going to refer back to Jessica Fern again and Polysecure. She calls it something. It's called primal panic, and it's basically feeling anything on the emotional spectrum from a fear or a fear of missing out on something. The feelings may be envious or jealous. They might question why they should stay in the relationship too, right? So there's that primal panic that happens, right? Like, and
Hmm.
this is on the count of the partner that's not in the NRE. And I also think too that it does happen with the person that's in the NRE if you're not careful,
Yes.
right? Because if you do go into comparison mindset and you do allow that anxiousness and that excitement to take over you, you could very well start to compare your new relationship with your established relationships. And that's a very dangerous place to be
Because
because as you just said,
you're expecting your established relationship to give you the same feelings, the same chemical
exactly,
cocktail
exactly,
that the new
but they
relationship gives
don't.
you. No, they can't.
And it never will.
No.
Right? And it did at one point, but that's okay that it doesn't do that anymore because there's still value, as we discussed. There's still value, and we'll get into ways that you can mitigate the challenges that NRE can present, right? But I just
Yeah.
want to point that out that comparison thing works both ways, both for the partner that's feeling neglected or devalued, and it also works for the part. It also happens with the partner who's actually in the NRE and taking a look
Mm.
at their established relationships. Um, so do you want to cover the first one?
Sure. So, grounding ourselves. So, we've been with our new partner, and we are now meeting our established partner or spending time with them, either coming home to them or meeting them, you know, on a date. And we need to kind of shift the energy. So, getting out of the mode of, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, I'm all excited, to appreciation, to reminding and refocusing on the other relationship, the qualities that they bring to the table. What you appreciate about them could be anything from, I've been able to rely on them. They've been through a lot with me. They've seen me at my worst and, still love me. They've taken care of me when I'm sick, or, trusted me to take care of them, right? They've helped me raise children or pets, or, build a business or do an activity that built a lot of trust between us. So, like, just kind of sitting with those thoughts, feelings, and letting go of all the, you know, excitement that you've just been in, so that you can be fully present for the other person, because they deserve that, right?
Right. Some of the ways that might look like you could take a longer drive before heading home. So if if you're with a nesting partner, for instance, and you're on a date and you're in that excited new energy, right? New relationship energy, maybe take a little bit of a longer drive heading home. Listen to some music that might remind you of your established partner. Um,
Yes.
yeah. Or taking 5 to 10 minutes to do some meditation or deep breathing, right? For me, what I do is that I pull into the garage and then I take a few minutes and I just sit there and I do some deep breathing. I literally calm my nervous system down because my nervous system is very reactive or very activated in a good way,
Right.
but it's still activated, right?
Right.
It's not like I'm outside my window of tolerance or anything, but I'm excited. And maybe you don't want to see that excitement. Maybe your
Well,
partner, your
you,
nesting partner doesn't want to see that excitement. And we'll get to that in a minute because we can talk about whether or not that is something that you do want or don't want. But
yeah.
assuming that that's something that they don't want, then, calm yourself, right?
Here's the other piece of that is that you don't know their state of mind yet, right?
Right. Yep.
So when we're waiting to find out what their state of mind is, when we haven't yet seen them, right? It's a lot easier to default to less is more. They may feel
Sure.
particularly needy that day, and they may
Sure.
not want to hear about your fabulous date that you were just on, or they may not
Yeah.
want to feel the energy of that.
Right. So don't assume that just because they did the last time that they do this time.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of assumptions made about that, I think, especially with poly couples in particular.
Right.
And when we're talking triads or people who nest either in a triad or a quad, finding that time might be challenging. You might have to go for a walk. You might
Hmm.
have to advocate for some alone time so that you can shift gears. And I think it gets easier with practice too. Did you find that?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as with everything, it does get easier the more you do it. Something just popped into my brain,
Uh-oh.
and I think, yeah, I know, right? And I think it's we're talking about. So let's say, for instance, your partner is the compersion sort, right? They get excited for you when you're excited out being out with other people, and then you come home and you have that excitement, knowing that the last 4 times this has happened. And then all of a sudden you come home and they're not excited for you, right? So that's what I'm referring to about don't expect them to always be excited because there might be other circumstances surrounding that. Maybe you guys have children together and maybe the kids are just being assholes, you know?
What?
Or
Kids are
maybe
never
it's just,
assholes. What are you talking about?
or maybe, yeah, maybe it's just been a challenging day at work for that person.
Yeah.
Maybe they just got some really bad news about a friend or a loved one, right? So you don't know. And I think when we're in that energy, when we're in that new relationship energy, we're not seeing things clearly,
We're high.
right? So, well, but yeah, exactly. So what can
Yeah.
happen though is that my partner who normally feels compersion all of a sudden doesn't feel compersion. So I take that on personally. Like that becomes like, what the hell did I do wrong, right? So maybe, just maybe, even if your partner is a compersion type, doing that calming exercise before you go in every single time would benefit you so that you're able to show up and match the energy that your partner might have in that moment. And so if they are excited and they're like, "Oh my God, how did it go? How did it go? Did you, blah, 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 blah," right? I don't want to get graphic, but like, how did it go? Was it wonderful? Was it amazing? What did you do? Right? Or it might be, I had a really shitty day and I just don't feel like hearing about it right now.
Right, right. And that
Or
grounding
somewhere in between
exercise,
there.
yeah, the grounding exercise would then help you to manage whatever response, right?
It's,
If they come at you with, I really just need to be with you and I don't want to hear about your date, then you're prepared to not share, to not have that energy flowing through you. It's just a courtesy, really,
exactly.
right? It's about being a compassionate partner, which is one of our episodes if you'd like to check it out.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't remember the number. All right. So the other thing too is one of the things that we have done is something called a limited information agreement. And this basically means that we only share what the other person needs to know, things around sexual health and safety, scheduling, those kinds of things. And then further to that limited information agreement, we open it up to provide our partners the opportunity to ask us questions. about things that they might want to know, right? With the understanding, of course, that consent applies to people that aren't involved in that conversation. So an example would be you're on a third date, let's say, with somebody, and you have sex with that person, and then you go home. And in a limited information agreement, that conversation might look like, hey, tonight we leveled up and we had sexual intercourse. And that's it, because that's what you need to know for your sexual health and safety and the sexual health and safety of your other partners, because now you need to inform them of that interaction as well.
Right.
So as part of the limited information agreement, though, you might say, ask, okay, how was it?
Or is there
Right?
anything
But
I need to know?
or is there anything that I need to know about it, right? Or how was it? Or, so the point is that you open yourself up to having those conversations and answering those questions, but only to the point to where the person's comfortable receiving that information.
That's really important. We come across a lot of that with our clients where
A
they've
lot,
been
yeah.
overwhelmed by information. Like they're just like buffeted all the time by
Especially
details.
people that are new to poly. It happens a lot with new people
It
in the
does.
poly world. And I think part of that is that because there's a narrative out there that says that if you're poly, you have to have compersion. That if you're poly, that you have to want all of those details and share everything about your partner's life.
So you're talking about two different things. One, that you have to have compersion in order to be a good poly person, which we debunked in our episode about compersion. And two, so we value honesty and transparency, right? Obviously, that's part of why people use the term ethical non-monogamy. We use consensual, but a lot of people use ethical. So we value transparency and honesty, but that we confuse that with having to know everything or being entitled to knowing everything. So those are two different things, right? One is
Right.
the assumption of compersion is the highest form of poly and the healthiest. And the other is I'm entitled to know everything because we're poly. What? No.
Well, it's interesting.
My other partner didn't consent to that, and there's privacy in this relationship too,
Right.
right?
And that was the other point that I was going to say is that that information, knowing that information impacts your perception of other people too. And so if your other partner hasn't consented to giving you the details of that, then that's not honest. That's not transparent. Now, if you've already talked to your other partner and said, "Hey, can I share this with my, nesting partner or whatever?" and they say, "Sure, go ahead. I don't care. I don't have any boundaries around that." That's different. It's interesting. An analogy came up for me about this whole honesty, transparency thing, and this is kind of the analogy that I want to use, and I think it's funny. I hope you and the audience think it's funny too. But it's like, "Hey, babe, I'm just going to go to the bathroom really quick." That's really all you need to know. You don't need to know what I'm doing in the bathroom.
No.
It's nobody else's business but mine. And if there's somebody else in the bathroom with me, the person in the bathroom with me. But do you know what I mean? Like you don't say to your partner, "Hey, honey, I'm going to go have,
Never
a big
mind,
giant,
don't get it.
what?" I'm not. But you know what I mean? Like I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you're the type of person that gives that information, but you don't need to give that information is my point. Just saying that you're going to do something or going to the bathroom or, "Hey, I'm running to the store," like that's enough information. And if your partner wants to know more, they'll ask, "Oh, okay, well, what are you going to be doing at the store? What are you getting? Can you pick you know what I mean?"
Yeah. Well,
Right?
and the other piece of the privacy is we build trust by keeping things private.
Yeah.
We also build relationships by keeping things private because if I'm venting to you about another partner, I'm sharing a skewed perspective of something that we went through. And you're influenced by that. And so that changes how you feel about that person, possibly forever. Right? And then next week I'm good with it. I've forgiven them. It's not a big deal to me, but it's still a big deal to you. And you never felt the same way about that person again. Right.
Right. There's something to be said for compartmentalizing those conversations for sure. And I think going back to new relationship energy, in how all of this is. You with new relationship energy, I don't know about anybody else, but I want to just be like, oh my God, I did this and this and you know, and it's like I'm
Yeah.
excited and I'm a verbal processor. And so I'm excited. So I have to find other ways to get that out of me because you, in case of our relationship, aren't open to hearing that all the time.
Well, no, and
Right.
it can really feed a lot of
And
comparison too.
right. And I've also got an agreement with my other partners to not share certain bits of information. For
Hmm.
instance, you know, and the other thing that comes up too in this new relationship energy piece that's really important to understand is that the same thing goes for your cell phone communications as well, your texting communications.
Hmm.
Those are private between two people,
Hmm.
right? And so if you're really excited because your new partner, your new lover just sent you a really wicked, beautiful picture, and you turn around and you show that to your partner without your other partner's consent, that's not okay. In my
That's
book,
a
that's not okay.
that's a breach.
That's a that's a breach of trust,
Hmm.
right? That's a breach of that autonomy, that person's autonomy, because they haven't said yes, show that person this picture, right?
Hmm.
So this applies not only in the communication between two people physically, but it applies virtually as well in texting and so on and so forth,
For
right?
sure. For sure.
So anyway, it was a little bit of a digression, but I think it's important because in that new relationship energy piece, we get really excited. We don't think about these things
No, of course not. Because
because our
we're
brain's not capable of thinking about those things in those moments. It's like, holy shit, look how hot she, oh, oops, sorry,
yeah.
you know, or he is or whatever, right? You know, it's like, so maybe you might want to say, hey, can I share this with my partner if they're open to that?
And
Or
then
maybe
check
it
in with
just,
your partner before you share. Don't just
exactly,
throw it in their
exactly.
face. Yeah.
I think the next one is comparisons. Like they enjoyed the ski trip so much more than you did.
Ah.
I don't know. That's kind of a dick thing to say. I would never say that to somebody ever. I wouldn't.
You think you wouldn't, and then in the moment, it's kind of like, you
Falls out of your
know,
face.
well, okay, there's reasons why people do this, and I'm gonna call you out a little bit because you have done this a little bit.
Yes, yes. Call me out. I have.
Yeah, you have. So, you've talked to me about the things that you want to do with new partners, the things that I can't do. And we went through this a little bit in our episode on chronic conditions, right? So, if
Mhm.
you're telling me a list of things that I can't do because of my chronic conditions that you now want to go do with other people, it leaves me it leaves me feeling really kind of less than, right? It's that comparison.
Right.
It's that, oh, I can't, they can. Well, yay, you know? Um,
Mm.
it's a slippery slope, and I know why people do it. They do it as a way of saying, this is why poly is great. This is why I value poly and like having other partners to do things with. Because you may not be interested in camping overnight in the forest, right? But this person is, and I like to do that. So I want to go do that with them. And I understand why it comes up. I guess what I'm doing here is just cautioning people to be mindful of how often that happens, right? Like just knowing that your partner is enjoying an activity with somebody else that you can't or don't want to do is enough. We don't need a list necessarily. We don't need it to know every time necessarily, right? Because it can set up that feeling of, well, I'm not the partner that you want. They are. And then that question comes up. Do they even want to be in a relationship with me? All that stuff, all of the insecurities, right? So we're trying to mitigate impact, and that will lessen your partner's insecure feelings, hopefully, right? Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you for that, and thank you for calling me out. I appreciate you.
We did talk about it at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure we did. We always do.
Yeah.
But I just thank you for calling me out on that. You're right. I can't say that I can never imagine doing that because I have done that. And now that I think about it, I've done it more than once. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being open to that.
Sure, sure. Fine. No, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
there's other things that we can do. We can reassure, like we recommend anyway, right? Reassure, I love you, even though, I'm going out to do this thing with so and so. And check in with your established partner on the regular. We recommend that sort of weekly. We do it more than weekly, I would say, but in a more casual way. We also have a check-in list that we can send people if they're interested. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and we do it in a more casual way because we've been doing it for a while now. So we know, like we can do it
Hmm.
over coffee in the morning. Hey, are you open to a check-in? Let's do this really quick. And so it's not as long and
Detailed.
intense
Yeah.
and detailed as it used to be.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, for sure. But check-ins are absolutely good. Um, I it's interesting that we have to mention this, but we do. So step up and be mindful of doing your part around the house, like with your chores and in your relationship and stuff. But the reason we mention that is because again, keep in mind that new relationship energy is a pretty powerful draw, and it does create a bit of single-mindedness, right? You have blinders on. So in that work towards balance, understand that there's still shit that needs to be done around the house,
For
right?
yourself if you live alone, or
For yourself,
for
yeah,
the
exactly.
family if you have a family,
Right?
right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. So just understand that you do have those needs that need to be met,
Yeah.
whether those are needs personally or whether they're needs that require, that involve family members or whatever. Um, I think I think the other thing too, in response to that, is that if you and your new partner are, and it depends on the relationship and it depends on the agreements that you have in place, but maybe you might want to consider that if there is some jealousy or envy happening with an established partner, that maybe you might want to step in and say, hey, is there anything I can be doing around the house? So let's say, for instance, you and your new partner are spending a lot of time in the house with the established partner. Maybe step into that a little bit and say, hey, is there anything I can be doing for you to make you feel more comfortable? Right?
Or even ask straight up, is there anything that we're doing or I'm not doing that's making you uncomfortable?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
just that's part of the checking in again, right? And it's also part of making sure that you're doing your part around the house, right? Because
Yeah.
maybe your new partner's leaving dishes around that your established partner is cleaning up. That
Yeah.
could be resentment, right?
Yeah, maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but the 10th time. you know?
Possibly, yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, for sure.
Um,
Just things
yeah,
to consider, right?
yeah, exactly. And being enthusiastic about your routines and rituals, like, okay, what's our favorite thing to do together?
No shopping, grocery shopping.
That's right. So, like,
We get to do it this after this too.
I know we're
Yeah.
gonna do it after this. So when we go grocery shopping, I feel kind of like date energy around that. I'm kind of like, because we've made it more than a routine into a special routine, right? It's not just something we have to do once a month. It's something that we like to do, that we feel good about doing together. And when we're waiting in line at Costco, we smooch, and even if we're wearing masks, we have COVID kisses, or we cuddle a little bit, or it just feels really grounding and couple centric. It makes me feel like we're not, I don't know, providing these groceries on our own. Like sometimes when I go grocery shopping on my own, I'm kind of like, I wish Greg was here. But that's partly because I enjoy that with you, right? But acknowledging that and saying, okay, this is a routine that we have that we both enjoy. It just
Mhm.
makes it even more special, I think.
Right, right. And being enthusiastic about it
Yeah.
when it feels right,
Yeah, when it's authentic.
when it's authentic, exactly.
Yeah.
And further to that, being present with them. So when you're spending time with established partners, be present with them. Put the phone
Oh.
away, right?
It makes a
Create carve
huge difference putting the phone away.
carve out intentional time. It's
Yeah.
it's so important. I cannot stress it enough.
So what does that look like? Like, do you want to use some of our examples?
Yeah, sure. So with other partners, I will let them know that I'll be offline or unavailable. And I literally put my phone away and you and I spend intentional time doing whatever we're doing together.
Yeah.
Um, you know, yeah. So that's what that looks like is I'm not distracted by other partners or other things. Um, and that includes family too. Like
I actually want to just comment on that because I would, as a partner, really appreciate sort of knowing when your intentional time is so that I can step into that with you and not text, right? Like having you let me know, like say I was your girlfriend, that would be really valuable to me,
Mhm.
right? Because then I don't feel like I've texted and I'm waiting on a response for hours and I don't know what's going on, or because that's my anxious side,
Mhm.
or I don't feel sort of dismissed out of hand, right?
Right, right.
I'm kind of cognizant and you're making me part of your life by including me in this is my schedule today, right?
Hmm.
That's really helpful. I love that.
Right. And I think it's important too that if you're one of those people that doesn't, again, that likes limited information agreements, that you don't need to get detailed about it. You can just say, I'm going to be offline for the rest of the evening. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. And so
Exactly.
you're setting that expectation to the other person who's not there, and what you're doing with that time is doesn't matter.
Right. You
Like for
could
me,
be,
sometimes I say that. Yeah, sometimes I say that for me because I just want to watch movies and be by myself.
yeah.
Right? That's
Hmm.
intentional time with me. Right? Doing things I enjoy
Yes.
doing.
And that's
Right?
really important too when you're looking for balance. We're having the conversation about balance because
Right.
we forget about our own time with ourselves, our recharge time, our self care time, our, journaling, having a long shower or a bath or listening to some music or whatever, right?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
super important.
absolutely. Very important.
Yeah, because
Um,
you have an established relationship with yourself too.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Maybe we should do another podcast on that. Taking care of
Maybe,
yourself and Polly.
maybe.
That's a good idea.
Ooh, I'll write that
Maybe.
down.
Yeah, there we go.
So
Keep an ear
checking
out
in,
for it.
we talked about
Yeah.
checking in, holding a safe space for them to share how they're feeling without getting defensive, right?
Right.
Recognizing that we want our partner to self advocate. We want to know how they feel. We don't want them to repress those feelings just to make us comfortable.
Right.
And then, while you're listening, remember that your chemical reaction might kind of make you want to defend your new relationship, where
Mhm.
really what needs to happen in that moment is probably your established partner just needs to be heard and validated, you
Right.
know, so that
Yep.
they know that they matter.
Right. Um, so the next one on the list we actually talked about, so I'll just go to the next one. Don't talk about other partners frequently.
Yeah.
Check in to see if it's a good time to share something about them. If it's not, don't take it personally, right? One of the things that we do is, hey, is this a good time or are you open to me talking to you about so and so?
Yeah, super
Or can I
helpful.
share something with you that happened with so and so,
Yeah.
right? I think that's really important, especially if it's something um, on the more, yeah, well, anything really.
Yeah.
If you're in that kind of a dynamic. Now, if you're not in that kind of a dynamic and you're kitchen table poly and you all live together and everything, there's still some of that that could happen that might help you navigate through your relationships a little bit better, but a little
Hmm.
bit more effectively. Because
Absolutely.
if you're having a conversation with somebody about somebody else who's also in the house, you might want to be maybe a little mindful of that,
You
what
might
you're
want to bring them
sharing,
in
and
on it.
you might want to bring them in on it. Exactly,
And be
right?
careful of
So,
triangulation where you kind of
oh
ally
my
with your
gosh, yes,
partner against your other partner. Like that's really common.
absolutely. Yeah, it's really common, especially in triads. It's really
Yeah.
common. So, yeah, so just be open to asking partners if they're willing to hear about what you want to share about them, and don't constantly talk about your other relationships.
Hmm. I mean, that's part of being present too, right? Like if you're constantly bringing up your other partners, you don't have space to breathe within the relationship that you're supposed to be focused on right now.
Right. Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Acknowledging the NRE, even to the point where you would ask, how is it showing up in our relationship? Is it impacting you negatively or positively? Getting some feedback, you know? Say, I am experiencing it when it's happening so that your partner's aware and they can kind of not necessarily adapt or adjust, but be also there with you, right? As a compassionate partner, understanding that that's a shift and that's occurring now. And so sometimes it hits you like a tidal wave at the beginning of a relationship. Sometimes it builds over time. So you never really know if it's happening or not unless you're talking about it, right? And then, as you said, what can I do to help you feel more comfortable, or where am I stepping out of our relationship where I should be leaning in, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Stepping out meaning not cheating, but
No,
like,
no, stepping
yeah.
away from like tending to the relationship. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Thank you
Right.
for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that leads nicely into the next one, which is um, show appreciation to your established partner.
Yeah.
Acknowledge them, acknowledge the things that they do for you, and how they continue to show up for you in the relationship, even if it's challenging for them. Maybe they don't like your new partner,
Hmm.
but they continue to show up for you, and they continue to support you in that relationship. Um, maybe they're, making cupcakes and throwing them into picnic baskets for you when you go, whatever, right? Like just I can't speak enough about thank you. Thank you. Those two words are just massively huge in my world. And it's
Hmm.
not because I need to hear them. It's because I want the people in my life to know that I appreciate them and that they matter to me. And the simplest way that you can do that is just to say thank you or
Hmm.
I appreciate you, right?
Yeah. So we talked earlier about how, there's different feelings that come up for the established partner. Could be anything from fear of missing out to full on primal panic.
Mhm.
But, part of that is the internal script that happens too, which is, I think I touched on it earlier, the feeling of I'm not good enough for my partner. I'm not the partner that they want. Clearly, they're looking for other things. And, hopefully you're, if you're struggling with that, if you're struggling with those internal dialogues that are negative spirals for you, you get some help. Get a coach, get a like us, reach out to us, get a therapist, even a trusted friend who is experienced with poly or who understands poly, to talk about that with, because it's pretty common, and
Mhm.
especially in the poly world, because poly gives us lots of gifts, and one of the gifts is for us to look at our insecurities.
That's right.
And you talked a little bit about shadow work.
Mhm.
So when we're talking about this kind of stuff, we're talking about doing that work and really looking
Mhm.
at yourself. And what are the kinds of things that people can do to help with that?
With the shadow work,
Yeah.
well, as you mentioned, coaching is big. I mean, one of the things that we provide to our clients is not only just an outlet to be able to express themselves, but also an opportunity to call them out on some stuff and invite them to get curious about their behaviors and how they're showing up in their relationships. So
Hmm.
coaching is a way to do that. Journaling is another fantastic way to do that. Um, yeah, those two things come to mind. Meditation, those types of things. Anything that forces you to look inward, anything that forces you to get curious about your behaviors, your perceptions and views, your lens to the world, and how
Hmm.
you're showing up in relationships. Because oftentimes, like you mentioned, I mean, a great example of that is what just happened earlier between the two of us when you called me out on
Oh yeah.
something, right? right? That's shadow work because I didn't realize it. And
Right.
now that I realize it, now I'm going to go and frankly, I'm probably going to be doing some journaling this afternoon about it because now I'm going to take a look at how else have I showed up in the world that way?
Right. Yes.
What other things have I taken for granted? Or what are the things that are unconscious? So shadow work is that unconscious stuff, stuff that
Hmm.
doesn't come right up, the stuff that drives a lot of our behaviors, maybe, behaviors that aren't necessarily helpful or healthy for us, right?
Hmm.
And so when I say things like I would never say that, well, there's some shadow work under there that needs to be done because it's obviously number one, not true, because I did say it. And
Hmm.
number two, why is it so important for me to have to say I'd never say that?
Right, right. So, what is it that you value about not saying it? And what is it that served you in saying it?
Exactly. And
Right.
that's shadow work. And
Yeah.
that's essentially how it's done. So yeah. So yeah.
Fantastic.
The other thing that I wanted to point out too, I'm a big fan of summarizing things.
Hmm.
I like the KISS philosophy. Keep it simple, in my case, stupid. Um, and so one of the things that's coming up for me around all of this is all of these things have one thing in common. All of these things that we've invited people to consider, and that is communication.
Hmm.
Communicate with the people in your world and communicate with yourself.
Hmm.
Talk, be open, invite, investigate yourself and other people around you to step into these experiences with you in whatever ways they feel comfortable doing it. Drop the assumptions and the expectations that you have around how other people should be showing up. And the
Hmm.
one way that you can do that is to communicate. Hey, how do you feel comfortable showing up in this? Hey, I feel this way. How is that impacting you? Or, hey, I did this thing. How did that impact you? And sometimes it's a 5-second conversation. Oh, it's fine. I don't care. And sometimes it's a 5-hour conversation.
Yeah.
But if you're new to this experience, which by definition, new relationship energy is,
Hmm.
it's never the same twice. Even though
Yeah.
you're the same person experiencing it, it's always different. The levels are different. The way it shows up in your life is different because each relationship is unique. But the
Yeah.
one thing that you can do is to communicate and to check in with your partners and to check in with yourself and communicate with yourself about it. How am I showing up? How is this impacting me?
Yeah.
Right? And externally, how is it impacting other people? And I promise you this, and I know this is kind of a bit of a, what do they call it? A blanket statement, but I'm okay with it. And please call me on it in the comments if you want to. Call me up, say, Greg, you're full of shit. You're nothing but a fucking idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. But this is the one thing that I feel. I promise you that everybody on the planet has made mistakes in new relationship energy. And everybody on the planet will continue to make mistakes in new relationship energy. This
Hmm.
isn't about not making mistakes. This isn't about not showing up in new relationship energy. This is about bringing awareness to how you feel and how those feelings and your actions based on those feelings impact the people in your life.
Hmm.
And so, I, yeah, I, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I'd
gonna shut
like
up
to
now.
add to that, while you're in new relationship energy, especially in the deep end, that's not the time to make life altering decisions.
Right. I love that. It's one of my favorite things that you say to people.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a little blog about it if you want to visit my website and check it out. But it's true. I mean, and I've seen it a lot. And it's
Yeah.
quite unfortunate when the new relationship energy ends or wanes and starts to turn into more established relationship energy. And people are wondering, why did I move? Why did I change careers? Why did I, they're coming out of that high and they're shocked at their own behavior. It's quite remarkable.
It is. And it's also interesting too, because it doesn't always happen. Well, it very rarely happens right away. It usually happens over time.
Yeah.
And it's pretty insidious the way it shows up, right? And I know for me personally, I was a relationship jumper for a long time. And I would be making decisions in new relationship energy. I was lucky enough to be able to what do I want to say?
Adapt.
Interesting. Yeah. I was lucky enough to be able to adapt in
Yeah.
those situations. Um, but I was still doing that, and I saw how it impacted not only me but the people in my life. Because
Yeah.
once the NRE wore off, right? That's when the real work began.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wasn't there for it.
And people can be addicted to NRE, right? We mentioned that
Mm.
earlier.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Yeah. How does that, just out of curiosity, I know we're almost out of time, but just out of curiosity, how would somebody know that they're addicted to new relationship energy, do you think?
I would say if it's impacting your functionality, either in your established relationship or in your family and friends group or at work. And when it's impacting it and it's that impact is consistent and it happens each time you're in a new relationship, but you don't feel the impacts until later. Like we're often kind of not, we're numb to it for a bit, right? Bouncing from relationship to relationship, like you just described, can be a sign of new relationship addiction. And when you're not in a new relationship, you feel lost, you feel hopeless, you feel like you're worthless, right? That can be a sign of new relationship energy addiction too.
Right.
So
Cool. I'm bored.
bored, feeling bored.
Mhm.
Um, that so I would say if somebody feels bored and they're in a new relationship, that's where the new relationship energy is starting to wane,
Mm.
right?
Right.
So maybe the
Gotcha.
pheromone chemistry isn't quite right. I know.
Right,
I'm
right.
a scientist at heart, so I guess I'm always going back to that. I'm a weird mix
Right.
of wacky woo and science. So
Wacky woo.
I believe in both.
And by
The
that,
psychic spiritual
yeah, right?
energy. Yeah.
That's right. They can coexist. Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think? Do you think we've covered everything we wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Shall we wrap it up then?
Absolutely. And remember,
Choose love.
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions. And remember to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Now Relationship Support and Advice for All.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
And leannemillion.com.
or follow us on Instagram at gregmillion.lifecoach.
And at Leanne Million.